Billionaire investor Warren Buffett makes a big commitment to CNBC parent General Electric. He talked exclusively with our own Becky Quick a short time ago. Becky, what do you have?
Well, you know, Warren Buffett swooping in again, and this time, Melissa, with an investment in General Electric, our parent network, the parent company of this network. This deal is very similar to the one that he did last week with Goldman Sachs. On this one, he gets preferred stock with a 10% dividend. It's callable after 3 years with a 10% premium, and Berkshire also gets warrants to buy another $3 billion at a strike price of $22.25 a share. If you take a look at the stock reaction today, yeah, you can see when that news came out, minutes before 2 o'clock, stock price jumped. It was very briefly in the green. Still, the stock paring its losses today, down about 88 cents, but again, paring the losses off the weakest levels of the day. The obvious question is why GE?
General Electric is, you know, it's the backbone of American industry almost, and I know Jeff Immelt. I knew Jack. I've known Jack Welch, well for decades, and they've got some marvelous businesses, and they've got I'm sure they've got some troubles in their finance business, and they've become tainted, as every company is that has to borrow a lot of money all the time, and they're going to be around 5 or 10 or 100 years from now, and if you buy it at the right time, and you'll probably make some money.
But, and there is a big but here, this deal, just like Buffett's Goldman Sachs deal from last week, is predicated on the idea that Congress will pass a rescue plan, and soon. I also asked Mr. Buffett what will happen if that deal doesn't go through Congress. Listen up.
No, I think we've got terrible, terrible, terrible problems. I said 2 weeks ago that it was an economic Pearl Harbor, and frankly, 2 weks later, we're in worse shape because you don't want to delay when there's really a national emergency. So I think that's probably obvious to a majority of the members of Congress now, and I think we'll get action. If we don't, I'll have done some dumb things.
Yeah, well, over the last week or so, plenty of people have asked why. If this Paulson plan is such a good deal for the American taxpayer, well, why doesn't Mr. Buffett do this deal himself? We asked him that, and he says because he doesn't have $700 billion. But listen to this. He did say that he would take 1% of the deal if he could. And, Dylan, you have to wonder if Capitol Hill is going to come calling on that offer anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, again, if they create a market for all these securities, as I continue to carry on, Becky, Mr. Buffett and everybody else in the world that has money will get a chance to bid on them, as you well know.
Yeah, fair way to make a market, right?
Yep. Great reporting, as always, Becky. Thank you so much. Whitney Tilson from T2 Partners, closely following the actions of Mr. Buffett for years, joins us now by phone for analysis of the action. He gets a 10% yield on this investment. He gets warrants to buy $3 billion more of the stock at a strike price of 22 and change, Whitney. Pretty favorable terms once again from Mr. Buffett, not unlike those that he got at Goldman Sachs. How do you interpret it?
Yeah, absolutely. Berkshire Hathaway is one of our largest positions, full disclosure, and we are absolutely thrilled as Berkshire shareholders by yet another deal done on extraordinarily favorable terms to Berkshire Hathaway.
Becky just spoke to Mr. Buffett. Mr. Buffett said given the opportunity, he'd be good for 1% of some of these assets if there was an actual marketplace for them. If we're going to put these public dollars at risk, Whitney, why can we not demand a public marketplace for their disposition?
I think it's interesting that I hadn't heard Buffett say that before. I'm a little bit surprised. He had said earlier that if he had a cost of capital equivalent to the U.S. government, i.e. about 4%, 10-year treasuries can be issued, and the U.S. government can raise money at less than 4%. In other words, earning an 8 or 10% rate of return when your cost of capital is 4%, that can be pretty attractive both to the taxpayer and to the financial system. I'm not sure whether Buffett or anybody else has that same advantage.
Yeah. What do the terms, which are clearly favorable to Berkshire Hathaway, you're happy about it as a shareholder, clearly favorable to Mr. Buffett, what are the terms of that deal, which again favor you as a shareholder and Mr. Buffett as an executive, say about General Electric, who has to pay those terms for the money?
Well, it's interesting. They're only paying those terms on $3 billion, and they're raising at least $12 billion more. So to some extent, they're bringing in a little bit of Buffett so that they are able to raise a much larger additional amount of money. I suspect they'll raise more than $12 billion. So that's part of it. I also think this is an environment where market confidence is so important, and GE is very dependent on commercial paper, and if that bill does not pass Congress, even mighty GE could start seeing problems in the commercial paper market. And so having the Buffett imprimatur here they're paying for the psychology, not just the capital.
Yeah, it's sort of like an endorsement deal with Michael Jordan.
You bet. And by the way, that was a big reason Goldman did it as well. But Goldman is even more vulnerable to market confidence than even GE. But I think it just tells you
But again, going back to my other point, if Mr. Buffett, and I can tell you, Bill Gross, you can go down the list, there are huge capitalists out there that, given an active marketplace for these securities, as complicated as they may be, we trade natural gas across different months and places and geographies. Why can we not demand that the public money being used create a public market for these securities to allow the likes of yourself, Whitney, Warren Buffett, Chris Flowers, Bill Gross, I can go down the list, to bid on these assets so we can actually get a market price, truly get a mathematical definition of our problem, and stop arguing among the accountants? Why can we not go down that road?
Well, I think there are two reasons. Nobody else, even all the capital you just named, is only a tiny fraction of the amount of capital the U.S. government brings in.
I'll throw China and Dubai in, too.
So the government needs to invest first, and then I think you'll find private buyers coming in. It's also important to note that the U.S. government, because of their much lower cost of capital, can pay an above-market price, which will benefit the financial system, not a ridiculous price where taxpayers get killed, but a moderately above-market price, and still it's a great deal for the taxpayers, again, because the U.S. government's cost of capital is only 4%, and guys like me and Flowers and Buffett are looking for a 20% annual rate of return, and the government would be happy with 8%, I think.
Yeah, understood. But the government could, in fact, use their advantage over you, Flowers, and everybody else to start a marketplace, if they so wanted to, that they could then display for a board for reporters like myself to look at, and you could bid on them. Is that not true?
Sure, and I'd be happy. You see, one of the big reasons private guys don't want to come in, even when the price is attractive, is because, let's say, J.P. Morgan puts up $10 billion of their option arm portfolio they just bought from WAMU or something. The problem is if I bid on that $10 billion, there's another $100 billion behind it. There's a huge overhang, so you need very deep pockets, and only the U.S. government has those pockets to sort of give confidence that the overhang isn't going to crush you if you buy today.
And I don't dispute that. I'm simply saying I agree. We need the government money. It's bigger than all of us. But let's use that government money to demand a public market to allow you and so many others to play with those assets. Whitney, it's great, as always, to get conversation with you and access to your brain and your willingness to communicate with people. Anyway, thank you.